Now is probably one of the best times to build, but it's also one of the noisiest and craziest times to build. For every idea, there's 10 competitors you know of, and up 20 you never even heard about, you didn't even know existed.
Can we talk about the DeepSeek moment?
Highflyer was very quant heavy, bought all these GPUs to do heavy trading. The government basically banned high frequency trading. It was like, we have all these GPUs, we have all these smart people, we can't really trade in the same way we could. What do we do, right? Let's go do some AI. Imagine what happens if you said, hey, all the smartest people from Wall Street, like instead of doing high frequency trading, go do AI, right? Yeah. How much further ahead could we be in AI?
I either look at the technology as being something that's very closely matching our brain, or that our brain is like quite not what we thought it was, you know?
As we understand LLMs and these models better, perhaps that our brain was not what we thought it was. We're not always rational, first principle, logical thinkers, right? As the cost of building software goes to zero, building a tech company ends up being kind of like dropshipping. You take the AI generated code from Anthropic OpenAI, you arbitrage some like go-to-market, and you repackage it, and it's a pretty scary thought.
The takeaway there for people, I think, is like, be sure to give yourself some freedom sometimes, right? Like unplug, even if it's just a vacation or a sabbatical, or, you know, sometimes maybe just taking that leap of faith into the unknown. So you've got a pretty extensive background. You've started out as an engineer, went into entrepreneurship, and now you're focusing a lot of your activity on AI, doing content creation around AI. Since your background, we don't typically do a lot of background, but I think yours is super relevant. So like, could we just talk a little bit about how you got to now?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. And thanks for having me here.
Of course.
So I engineered my training, studied computer science at the University of Waterloo. I got really lucky doing it during a time before it was super cool, and then before the crash in some ways, where software engineering is being automated. So I got in the right time. I fell in love with entrepreneurship, just building companies, talking to users, iterating quickly. I worked at a startup, interned at a startup, did my own startup. That was just a great experience into entrepreneurship. The fact that you can take technology and build stuff, things that wouldn't have existed. So I fell in love with that. I spent a year at Google after graduating. Great place, great people, but quickly realized it was too big of a company. It wasn't for me. It's hard to get things done. And I just wanted to get back to building. So I quit my job exactly after 1 year and started a company. So I started a company called Super.com in 2016. Back then it was just in the chatbot space, when messenger chatbots were all the craze. We started that company. And then over time we grew it and expanded our use cases. So started in travel chatbots, quickly realized chatbots might be good for people like you and I who are busy. You want to spend money to save time. But for the average consumer, they have too much time. They'd rather spend time to save or earn money. So we're like, you know what, forget the chat. Let's focus on what people want. Give them deals and savings. Did travel deals for the first 3.5 years. Then COVID hit. We lost 80% of revenue overnight. So yeah, it's a crazy journey. And I remember, lying in bed, like, is this all going to crash? All the things we did, all the things we worked on. But luckily, and through our own execution and focus, we buckled up, rallied through COVID, and then we actually grew through COVID. And I'm like, whoa, there's a lot more we can do to help our customers than just travel. Our customers were folks who are lower income, lower credit, who really needed to save money. And travel's fine, but you're traveling once, twice a year, right? There's way more ways to help them just once, twice a year. So we decided to do a lot more for our customers. So raised a large 85 million Series B, hired 100 people, became fully remote, got a bank partner, launched 5 different products, and rebranded Super.com all within a 1.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't recommend doing all of that at once. Somehow we did that, got through it. Now on the other side, it's Super App. It's an all-in-one app, help people save and earn money across travel, fintech, credit building, cashback, rewards, experiences. We have our own card, banking partner, money movement, credit building, all these tools helps our customers. We're about 50 million total users, 250 employees. We do over $1 billion in sales a year, 200 million revenue, profitable, growing 40+% year over year. So it's been a great journey. I just stepped back to the board at the end of last year. So my co-founder is now running the company with the leadership team. So now I'm on the board, and we spend a lot of time now helping founders, doing angel investing, dabbling AI, doing research, experimentation, all the latest tools and trends, and just kind of figuring out what's next. But it's been really fun creating AI, using AI, sharing about it, writing about it, and just kind of sharing what I'm seeing, the tools, the startups, and talking a lot about that on LinkedIn, Twitter. So it's been great. And now sort of exploring the AI space.
That's wow. I can't imagine you lost 80% of your business overnight.
Yeah.
And then you guys still went on and you managed to secure the bank partner, raise money, hire 100 people, pivot, launch new products. Like what, I mean, surely you learned a lot from that experience. I mean, what was that like?
Oh, it was crazy. You know, it was, I think I remember March 2019, right? I think that's when everything shut down, and we're about to go to a conference actually.
March 2020.
Sorry, COVID-19. March 2020. Sorry. 2020, and we're about to go to a conference, and then like everything shut down. Everybody's go home. No more no more office. Everybody go home, and then we just saw our numbers just plummet because no more travel. Right, and that was our only line of business back then.
Wow.
So yeah, I think it was a combination of surprise and shock, but also at the same time, we always knew we had really strong execution. We had really strong understanding of our business, our levers, or where we could affect the business. So, and my co-founder and I, we were really data-driven execution experts. So we knew kind of what levers to pull and manage. So we decided to tighten ship. We actually wrote about this on a post about the sort of 10 things we did to really manage the business through COVID. So cutting a lot of the extra non-performant marketing, improving some of our product lines to better fit the use cases, focusing on the customers who were traveling like essential workers. So we did a lot of that in a short amount of time, and we rallied the troops, and we sort of did a little bit of downsizing, but we also gave everyone extra equity to show sort of the solidarity and the alignment. And then we ended up also getting a little bit lucky because I think COVID came, but also for a lot of the population, right? People still were traveling, and especially sort of the essential worker folks and some of the other folks who maybe didn't believe in COVID. So combination. So we ended up rallying, focusing, and growing through COVID much faster than our competitors. And that's also when we realized we could do a lot more. If we could survive COVID down 80+%, come back and grow and be profitable, then we could do a lot more, right? Why limit ourselves to just one vertical? We had the ambitions, the motivation, the drive. At the same time, a lot of these companies, I think, remember the SPAC era, they were going public at crazy valuations, right? And so we're sitting here, our company, we're just a high level, go from zero to, I think back then, maybe 100 million top line, maybe 15, 20 million net. Your other companies like Lemonade, same thing, right? 120 million gross premium, maybe like 20% net. They were losing 100 million a year. We were break even. They went public for over, I think, $1 billion or $2 billion, right? We were worth less than 100 million back then, right? So it's like, wait a minute, if these companies can do that, why can't we? We're great executors. We have a great product and we know how to execute. Let's think bigger. Let's do more. Let's do more for our customers. Let's tackle more than just one industry. So that's kind of a motivation of our intrinsic drive and sort of execution, plus with the markets and some of the things that happen in the market. So that motivated us to think much bigger and then also just kind of shoot for the moon, right? And even if you miss, you land them on the stars. And so we had to do that and go through this journey. Now, it was much harder said than done, but we ended up going through it, raising a large round, hired 100+ people. But it was a crazy journey. I think we were raising a really large round as a travel-only company back then, pre-vaccine. So you can imagine how difficult that was to believe. And I think we talked to 145 investors, 144 said no. So it was quite the grind and process, right? But you just need one in many cases like this. And so ended up getting it done. So that's been our journey of
incredible.
Yeah.
That's remarkable perseverance. So how do we bridge into AI here? Was the business touching or dabbling in AI, or how did you become interested? Like how do you segue into?
Yeah, it's a good question about AI. So after going through this business, we were like, wow, we're just amazing operators and can build and grow. After this sort of fundraise and expansion, right, we launched 3 to 5 different new products, and each of them going from 0 to 8-figure annual revenue within a year, right? So we just had this formula to execute and grow and this playbook to scale, which is amazing. But the challenge was, as ChatGPT and AI came out, it was a little hard to apply AI directly to our customer facing side because our customers were people who they really care about saving, earning money. Right? AI is really good if you want to trade money for time. So if you want to spend money, you know, use ChatGPT, pay the premium subscription, and it'll save you all this time. Right? So it's really, really good for that. But for our customers, like they have a lot of time. They rather spend time to save and earn money. Yeah. And it's not very clear today how AI can help them directly with that. I mean, maybe in the future is a way AI can just make money for you, but outside of that, right? It's not super easy how AI can make the reverse trade-off. So it wasn't super clear on the customer facing side. Internally facing, we did use AI, but it's hard because the company had a lot of history. We're fully remote and everything's moving so quickly. Everyone's got their goals and priorities. So we did use a lot of new AI tools, but it's hard to really kind of dive deep into the sort of specifics of AI without sort of zooming out a little bit and thinking about it from a brand new perspective. And I'll give an example of this. When I realized is, so when we were, I think when we were maybe back in 2020-ish, I had a friend who was pretty early at Anthropic. Maybe they were like 50 people, right? So they were starting out and doing some like exploratory company partnerships. And I told my team, I was like, hey, this thing is going to be big, right? It's just ChatGPT just came out. This thing's going to be big. We had a sort of a unique partnership. We had a shared Slack channel. And I was like, hey, if we're going to do something with like AI customer service, this thing is going to be big. And what I realized is like, it's really hard for someone who's, if you think about it, if your career has been all in customer service and you've never seen AI before, and all of a sudden someone tells you, hey, this is a startup with 50 people, it's going to change the world. Like, okay, maybe, probably, right? But it was just so hard to digest for someone who's busy, who has OKRs, that actually, surprisingly or unfortunately, we didn't actually end up doing a lot with that partnership, right? And it's actually a big regret because if we did stuff and let's just say you're an investor, right? You probably would have had an amazing outcome. But that's kind of what I mean by like when you're busy running the company with a certain sort of high pressure environment goals and OKRs, you don't have time to explore all these new innovative creative things, right? And so now that I'm sort of taking a step back on the board, I have all this free time to explore different like tools, use cases, like startups, research labs, reading papers, playing with interesting tools, ideas, just dabbling with it. And then you can share about it more openly too, because when I was running the company, it's like our core business wasn't doing AI customer service, right? So it was also like if I was starting to play a lot and write about it, people might be like, hey, aren't you running this company? Aren't you supposed to be busy like running this company? What are you doing playing with AI tools in whatever domain like media? Right? So it just gives me the freedom now to explore, to share. And that's been really a lot of fun and also just a lot more like focus and clarity.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, that parallels the story I shared with you offline where I had like stepped out of the corporate world to start my own business, and it gave me all this freedom to get into ultimately the Bitcoin rabbit hole, which has changed my life and my career and all these things. And so the takeaway there for people, I think, is like, be sure to give yourself some freedom sometimes, right? Like unplug, even if it's just a vacation or a sabbatical, or, sometimes maybe just taking that leap of faith into the unknown. It is definitely scary. Can be scary. I don't want to say it's always scary, but oftentimes really good things come from it.
Yeah.
And so this, I guess you took this opportunity and this freedom to jump into the AI rabbit hole pretty deeply. So like what was it? What was that experience? What drew you in, and then how have things unfolded for you?
Yeah, happy to share. So a little bit of context too, I've been doing the company for 8+ years, right? And it was an amazing journey, did everything. I was a COO and CTO, so everything product and design, strategy, growth, supply, OKRs, execution. So the whole gamut, 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100 and beyond, and then multiple times over as we launched new products. So amazing experience. Finally, the company was in a spot where we're profitable, hundreds of millions of revenue, growing quickly. It wasn't going to crash and burn if I stepped back, knock on wood. So we have a great leadership team and really give people an opportunity to shine. So I felt like I could really let the team shine and grow and continue to grow. So then I take a step back. I'm still on the board. So in some ways, like I feel very honored and so lucky to be able to have that balance. And then so I took a step back. And then as I was sort of thinking about what's next exploring, right? There's all this AI stuff that I've seen in the company, but I just never had time to really pursue. And all these tools. And as you know, AI moves so quickly, right? So what we're doing like 2022 with customer service, like that was now kind of already out of date, right? And now we're doing all these new things have emerged, and these reasoning models and all these things. So I was like, oh wow, this is amazing. Let me do more, learn more. And so one, I was sharing content on social because I had a lot of like learnings and experiences from the company that I wanted to share. But for a combination of reasons, it was hard when you're running a company because one, I was like, okay, well, if I share something, what's my employees going to think? What's my customers going to think? And what's the board going to think? Right? It's a little bit just like you're somewhat constrained a little bit, or at least mentally, maybe you feel like you're constrained. Whereas now I'm on a board, it's like, well, I don't really care what people think. I say whatever. And that actually freedom and authenticity, I think people really appreciate. Like the algos that reward you for that, right? You can share kind of the behind the scenes, the losses, the wins, the vulnerability, the authenticity. So that's really good for building audience. And then with AI stuff, it's just a much bigger TAM, like much more people are interested. Like when I write about startup stuff, okay, that's fine. Maybe on a good day, I'll do like a post, I'll do 100,000, 200,000 plus views. When I write about AI stuff, right, I do millions because just so much more demand and audience for AI versus startup content.
Yeah.
I still do both, but AI has been great. So then as I was doing that, I was like, well, there's all this stuff going on, but there's not really a good way to like synthesize all of it, right? Like if I'm coming into AI, like I have a CS background, but I haven't been like coding AI for a while. So I was like, okay, how do I get back into it? And there wasn't really a great resource of all the latest collection, especially on the more like open research public side. There's so many papers, right? So many like posts. So I was okay, if I'm going to start from someone who has some experience, but go from 0 to 100 really quickly with AI with a focus on papers, right? That didn't really exist. So I spent just this Christmas break, or maybe the month of December, just like reading all these papers, like kind of building out the journey from, I guess, neural networks to LLMs to ChatGPT now to the reasoning models, right? And what are some of the seminal papers that will help you get there? And two things to that experience. One is I hadn't read a paper for a very long time, and I was like, wait a minute, this is actually not that bad. Like it's not like a crazy algorithmic, sorry, not all of it, but a lot of them are pretty intuitive. Like there are some papers that have thousands of citations, like so-called seminal papers. You read it, it's like, wait a minute, this is like, you could basically summarize this in like 2 sentences, right? It's like, think step by step, for example. It's a great paper, right? Lots of citations, but basically TLDR is if you tell the AI to think step by step, it does better. It's like interesting. So it sounds scary and you read the thing, it's like, all this technical jargon, but when you distill it, it's like pretty straightforward. Yeah. So then as I was doing this, I was like, maybe there's a way to really simplify these things, put them in a resource and make it accessible for people. So I did that, put this AI guide and just on GitHub and launched it. And that got like millions of views and impressions and shares and likes and like almost 4K stars on GitHub. I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool, right? And I had a lot of fun learning and enjoying and doing that. And then also it was a good way to kind of share with others and kind of be on that journey. So started doing more AI content and stuff like that, whether it's like the foundational stuff or tooling or startups, just seeing new trends, talking about it, creating some awareness and highlighting some of these use cases. It's been a lot of fun and also helpful for me to kind of think about what's next. Yeah,
that is so cool. Just from my own personal experience here, like getting to learn, I call it learning out loud or learning in the light or something. It's like, I basically just get to read these books that I find to be interesting.
Right.
I'm trying to learn things, asking a deep question and trying to figure out some answers to it. And then I get to talk to whoever I want, basically. Really smart people, and then audience gets to enjoy as we're learning or wrestling with the ideas out loud, they're learning too. So it's like there's this virtuous feedback loop that you can tap into now through content creation and the internet, and it's super cool. It sounds like you were doing the same thing basically.
And it's also, I would add, I think one of the best ways to learn is actually to write about it because it's a forcing function for you to make sure you really know your stuff. Right. Because a lot of times you read something, it goes in one ear, it comes out the other.
Exactly.
Whereas if you're writing about it, you have to really know your stuff because you don't want to look like an idiot or something. Right. So it's a good forcing function. And then content is a great way to do it in a cadence because content, you have to do it every week, every day. So that cadence forces you to like, always keep learning. Whereas sometimes you have a spike and then you forget, you get lazy. Whereas content, it forces you. So the combination of learning through sharing and the cadence of it, I think is a great combination.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic and well said. I've always put it I've always liked to read, but then only really in Bitcoin have I started writing producing, written content,
Right.
Which led to this podcast, kind of verbal content. But something about the trifecta of reading about something, then forcing yourself to write about it, which is that forcing function.
Right.
Like, what did you actually comprehend?
Exactly.
And then I've noticed too, if you talk about the things that you've written,
Right.
it seems like it implants them very deep in the subconscious.
Yes.
Like there's papers I've written years ago that I can recall very easily. Wow. It's something about the exercise. I think of writing, and then talking about it. Yes. And so that's a good little trifecta for people to implement. You mentioned a lot of these seminal papers or really good resources in your journey and learning about AI. Could you mention some of those? Because like I'm someone who's at the very entry point to the AI rabbit hole, and I want to learn. I'm a reader predominantly. Right. So what are some of these seminal papers or books or other resources?
Yeah, so it's a combination. There's like some foundational like videos on like neural networks. I think that's so I listed it in the and you can share the link to the audience. It's an AI crash course. I think if you Google it, if you Google AI crash course, I think it's like the third link.
Okay, so you have already put this together in AI crash course.
Yeah, it's on AI crash course on GitHub. So we can link to that. But starts with like a video on just like neural networks, right? Like backpropagation, all the historical context on just neural networks. Mm-hmm. And then there's some seminal ones like the ChatGPT paper, right? Like the large language models and how does that work? And then there's ones on like scaling laws, like what gave people OpenAI, the team, the confidence to keep scaling these things was that they saw the performance, and when you graph it, you can look at the scaling laws. Those are some of the motivations behind how do you go from GPT 2 to 3 to 4. It's like the scaling laws. Yeah, that's a good one. And then there's also some papers from I think Llama did a pretty good job. DeepSeek also had pretty good papers on how like the open source, all the different hyperparameters, how the tuning. Because OpenAI stopped releasing some of these like more behind the scenes.
They became less open.
Exactly. So now others have kind of stepped up a little bit to fill the void on these like later models. So like the R1 paper is really good. DeepSeek V3 is pretty good. Llama 3 is also pretty good from just like how do they train this thing? It's pretty comprehensive. And then there's a bunch of other ones like the, I want to say more enhancements like the chain of thought, tree of thought, graph of thought papers. And then there's also some interesting papers on benchmarks that how do you measure these things, right? And like how do you sort of evaluate? And so it's a combination. But the sort of post has all these listed out with references and sort of which ones are recommended or.
Very cool. iCoin Technology has released a slick new hardware wallet. It looks like a mini iPhone with a high-res 3-inch touchscreen and camera on it. The device has no Wi-Fi, no cellular connection, and no GPS. It is an air-gapped hardware wallet which uses QR codes and a camera to communicate with the Bitcoin network. It has a built-in camera which is required for air-gap operation, and it has an optional Bluetooth compatibility. It's really a brand new user interface and user experience for a Bitcoin hardware wallet. iCoin makes self-custody accessible, easy to use, and non-intimidating. It even comes with an optional custom iCoin thermal printer so you can print out the private key and its associated QR code when you're setting up the wallet. This makes setup quick and simple. Also, it is easy to restore the wallet just by reading the seed phrase QR code with the wallet camera. And as we always talk about on this show, the only way you can truly own your Bitcoin is by having it in self-custody. So you need a device like the iCoin wallet to truly own your Bitcoin. So go to iCointechnology.com/breedlove today for 30% off the purchase of this sleek new hardware wallet. Again, that's iCointechnology.com/breedlove. In times of chaos, clarity can be currency. Right now, supply chains are fragile and cash flow has never been more volatile. If your business can't adapt in real time, then you're exposed. That's where NetSuite by Oracle comes in. It's the #1 cloud ERP, trusted by over 41,000 businesses for a reason. It gives you total visibility, from global shipments to real-time cash flow to the true cost of what's stuck. NetSuite consolidates accounting, finance, inventory, and human resources into one unified platform, one source of truth. With AI baked in, routine tasks get automated away so that your team can stay focused on high leverage activities. If I were scaling a business right now, NetSuite is the system I would use. One system, full control. With NetSuite, you can tame chaos. If you're running a business doing 7 figures or more in revenue, grab their free ebook, Navigating Global Trade, 3 Insights for Leaders, at netsuite.com/whatismoney. Again, that's netsuite.com/whatismoney. What we often do on this show is we find ourselves coming to terminology, because it's very important to get very tight on the consensus on each term so we know what we're talking about here. And AI is like this catch-all.
Right.
We're typically we're talking about LLMs, right? Large language models predominantly. And maybe there's other areas where we're not. I'm not exactly sure, but it seems like my experience with AI up until this point has really just been the large language models. Yeah. And I don't know if an image generator falls into that category or not. But those are the 2 tools that I've made use of personally.
Right.
Could we try to just define some of these most elementary terms? Like you already mentioned neural networks. I know things like context window matter a lot, parameters, maybe some other essential terminology. Could we talk about that and put some definitions to them?
It depends on, are you talking about from a end user use case or from like a more foundational training piece?
I think just learning, trying to understand what these things are in intuitive layperson speak.
I see. I think, that's interesting. I don't know if the terminologies matter as much as more as the concept and the first principles, right? So if you think about neural networks, right? It's like it's like a model of a brain, right? Some people say, and you have these like nodes, and if you think about synapse in the brain, you have a neuron with like different connections to other neurons, and it fires signals and it activates different neurons, right? And that's the brain, and your brain is like, I don't know, I don't quote me on, there's like billions plus of neurons, right? And it's all like firing very quickly. And different parts of the brain get activated on different sort of tasks and work. So I think neural network, the more traditional one is you just have you have like nodes and then different connections to other nodes, and then you stack them in different layers, right? That's like a traditional.
Is this like a mind map basically?
I don't know the mind map. It's just more like neurons. Probably just, if you think about a neuron, you typically draw a node and you draw like the long stem, and then you have like the synapse layers here, right? It's kind of like artificial neural networks. Just you have a node, and then you have some connections to other nodes, and you have different weights and biases and different like strength of connections. And then you kind of activate them through a task, and then when you train, you kind of back propagate and update the weights. So that's like basically like a basic neural network. And then the large language model is just you have deep neural networks, so you have many layers, which historically were really hard to train. But now with GPUs and like different algorithms, you can train them. You can train them better, and then also you have layers of deep neural networks in transformer heads, which we don't have to get into, attention heads, and then you stack them, and you have hundreds or thousands of these things, and then you end up with hundreds of billions of parameters in this. Like every node, if you sum up all the nodes and the weights and the biases, you have hundreds of billions of parameters, and this is just giant sort of like, I didn't call it graph, but this giant like neural network, and you're just like training it with all this data, right? You just keep updating parameters to make sure the predictions get more accurate. And after doing all this training, then you can fine tune it. But essentially, it's just like a giant, I don't call it a brain, but it's like a giant deep neural network, and stacks and stacks and stacks of them.
Is it, I've heard it described as like a probability engine where it's assigning, and I'm not sure if this is exactly correct, but the LLM is assigning each word a token, right? And there's a certain probability associated with that token of what word will most likely come next based on all of these interconnections. Is that like...
Yeah, that's the mechanism in which it does the prediction, right? So it gives it some context, and trying to predict the next token, or for simplicity, the next word. And then when it's doing prediction, it finds the maximum likelihood of the next word and picks that with some variance or some temperature, right? So then that's basically how it works now. the part that's surprising or maybe emergent is how does predicting the next token give you reasoning or intelligence or right? That's a pretty interesting question, right? And I think probably the best, most intuitive explanation is what Ilya said is if you think about predicting the next token as like a detective novel, right? So you have all this context and story of like, imagine you're in a detective novel scene trying to predict who is a killer. You have all this knowledge and story and background and plot and people and interviews. And now with all this thing, you want to predict who's the killer.
Yeah.
Right. And you can see how that's some form of reason and logic, right? And intelligence. So I think you can think of the neural network in some sense, like it's predicting the next token, but there's all akin to a detective novel. There's all this knowledge and context awareness that goes into predicting the next token. And that's how maybe intuitively understand why these things are like smart, even though it's just a token predictor.
Yeah, it's fascinating because it almost makes you want to think that intelligence might be reducible to some algorithmic process. But there's aspects of intelligence like contemplation that seem like they're not associated with that so much. So I don't know, like I either look at the technology as being something that's very closely matching our brain, or that our brain is like quite not what we thought it was, you know?
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. I want to ask.
I think maybe just on that point, right? I think Jeff Hinton, which is one of the godfathers of deep learning, I think he mentioned something to the effect of the latter, which is as we understand LLMs and these models better, perhaps that our brain was not what we thought it was, and that we're also a lot of us, or a lot of the brain is also just pattern matching,
right?
Which you can see why humans a lot of times, we're not always like, if you go deep down to the root of it, we're not rational first principle logical thinkers, right? We're also pattern matchers. I think about the survival days of you see a leopard and you jump or whatever, like the pattern matching of that, and you think about LLMs and token prediction, it's a little bit, maybe our brains were not always what we thought we were as we learn more about artificial neural networks and LLMs.
Yes. Yeah. It's like our technological paradigm which makes sense, right? It's as close as our own biology as we've ever been, which I guess you could say about almost any technological paradigm, is that we're progressing closer to what we are, right? Biological technology or whatever it is. So I want to talk about like predictive power and depth. So these tokens are being assigned to words, right? And then it's using all the existing contexts to basically assign a probability function to say what word is most likely to come next. And then it's just iterating that. All right. So the LLM's generating all this text, but that's basically the mechanism or the feedback loop that's outputting that text. And when you think about something, clearly predictive power is something very important. I think if we use something simple like force equals mass times acceleration, like it'll tell you about how a blue whale moves through the ocean, or how blood flows through your veins, or how, the spiral, how galaxy arms spiral a certain way. Like it's a deep idea or a deep model because so many things depend on it. So it has a lot of explanatory power or predictive power. I guess we'd say predictive power in this case more so than maybe explanatory. So is that what these models are ultimately useful for? Is like they're giving us, obviously they're doing this prediction thing up close, the mechanism, but then it gives us access to a tool that allows us to expand our own predictive power. Like, is that the name of the game here?
I think maybe that's the hope and the goal is, can you use these tools to then further advance research, right? Which is the ultimate sort of goal for some of these labs, I believe, which is you have these tools. And at first it was like kind of a token predictor. Then you like do post-training and, RLHF or SFT, and then you make them try to do tasks or be a helpful assistance or classification. And now with test time compute and reasoning, right, they can now think for longer and solve more complicated tasks. So I think a big part of the goal is, can you have these systems and tools and models perform research, right? So push the frontier of what we know. And then if the models can do research on making the models better, right, then you get a compounding effect.
Meta,
right? Compounding effect. And you're already seeing some of this, right? Where like we have really great tools that help you write code faster, easier, better, right? So if the LLMs can write code better than humans, which it's now you can argue in some cases it can, because it's scored in the top, I think 97 percentile of code forces, like the coding programming competition. So if you can write code better than humans, right, then it can generate more code that then improves the code, right? That's pretty powerful. And the same thing I think people want to do for research, whether it's research for science, biology, chemistry, LLMs, math. If you can do research, that's also very powerful.
Wow. What does the line get crossed? You mentioned reasoning, like advanced reasoning. And this is something that's been more recent, I think, right? In the past year or so. Yeah. So was there a discrete change in kind of this probabilistic feedback loop we described, going from that as kind of the basic mechanism for LLM generating output to reasoning? Or is it just a more intensive process of that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the arc of the development was, end of last year. I think ChatGPT 4 was been around for a while, right? And people wanted to, do ChatGPT 5
is that the advanced reasoning model?
No, not yet. So they want to do ChatGPT 5 or another version of a larger, bigger, more powerful model, right? Because one thought was, if you just throw more data, more compute at it, can these things get better? We saw that from ChatGPT 2 to 3 to 4, right? So okay, can we just apply the same scaling laws by just throwing data and compute at it to go from 4 to 5? And I think it didn't quite happen. And I think some folks kind of ran out of data, because there's only so much data you can train on the internet, right? And until you go to the physical world, you start generating data, and there's still some debate about whether synthetic data can or cannot push the frontier. But essentially, I think what happened was we kind of hit some local maxima with sort of the training paradigm of the throw more data, compute at it. And then so some of the folks started to, I think OpenAI pioneered this with O1, right? The first reasoning model, where instead of shifting all your training on training time, you also shift your resources on compute time. So when you're actually asking LLM, you spend more time or more resources on the problem itself at the time of inference versus time of training. So now
could you explain, just decompose that a little more, the difference between training and compute?
Sure. Training is basically, training and inference. Training is basically when you create one of these models, right? You have all this data, all this back propagation, all this fine tuning and human preferences. That's all training. And then when you're done with the training, you have this model, right? You have this model with hundreds of billions of weights and parameters, but it doesn't really change. It's there's a fixed model, right? And then when you inference is when you ask the model, hey, why is the sky blue? And the model does the activation, does the token prediction, and it tells you the sky is blue because of some effect of the light and the rays, right?
Okay.
That's inference.
So training is constructing the model. Yeah,
exactly. You're building it.
And then the compute is using it.
Right, inference is using it.
Yeah.
Right. So historically, all the resources were spent on training, right? You spend hundreds of millions of dollars, whatever, building this model. And then inference was pretty cheap, because you go in, neural networks activate, you do some prediction, it spits out an answer, right? Maybe it costs you I don't know, 1 penny per task, right? So it's hundreds of millions here on training, and then a cent on the inference. So then the thought is, okay, well, if we spend all this time and resources and money on training, what if we shifted some of it to also inference? So now during inference, instead of just spitting out an answer, what if we had the model reason more through it?
So more iterations.
Not even more iterations. I think it's just a chain of thought about the actual process in which it goes about generating the answer. So if you look at O1 or O3, you'll see how it's it says if you use it, it says thinking and going through the step-by-step process. So what if you gave the model more time and resources to actually reason about the answer? And you can do and there's different ways of doing reasoning. There's simple things like chain of thought, right? Or chain of thought, or think step by step. There's also things like giving it a giant prompt and just increasing the prompt length. There's also things like, sorry, my mind slipped my mind a little bit, so we have to cut this part a little bit. But there's also things like Monte Carlo tree search, right? Or so you try different paths and different approaches to the answer, and you go back. and you find the one that gives the best answer. So there's all these different things you can do at sort of inference time to make the models perform better. So that's kind of the thought. And then you can also do like sort of a voting mechanism, right? You have many models and then you run them in parallel and then you also pick the best answer. So there's all the things you can do, but the idea essentially is just spending like 99.9% of your effort on training and 0.1% on inference. Why don't we shift it so we spend more and more time on inference? And that's how you got the new O1 models and DeepSeek R1 and some of the new sort of reasoning models. And there's some good papers on that as well, talks about this, but that's kind of the essence. So now with more time, you can solve more complex tasks and it's a lot more effective in some of the hard sciences like mathematics and coding because these are verifiable, right? So you can have the model through reinforcement learning solve these like verifiable domain problems like coding and math and things like that through reasoning. So that's why you see O1, O3, they perform a lot better on like these math or STEM type of verifiable problems. Whereas on the more, call it like media or text or sort of a creative side, it does better, but not like significantly better. Whereas for like things like math, advanced math or PhD level, like sort of chemistry, it does significantly better, but the sort of creative side's only marginally better.
I see. Interesting. If you're anything like me, you understand that Bitcoin is something we can use every day to connect, to collaborate, and to build stronger, freer communities. As true Bitcoiners, you all know we are each responsible for onboarding more Bitcoiners. That's why I chose to partner with Cowbolt, an expense splitting app that settles in Bitcoin. It can be as simple as splitting a dinner bill. Your friend covers dinner and you reimburse them, but you send it back to him in Bitcoin. Now your friend has their first sats, and as I always say, where your money goes, the mind follows. By using Cowbolt to get Bitcoin into the hands of your friends and family, you can help us orange pill the world. Cowbolt is built to let you split costs, share expenses, and settle instantly, while always keeping full control of your keys. Cowbolt is simple, social, non-custodial, exactly how Bitcoin was meant to be used. If you're serious about Bitcoin, it's time to act like it. Download Cowbolt today on iOS or Android. To learn more, go to cowbolt.com. Again, that's Cowbolt, COWBOLT.com. Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. Some of this, maybe, correct me if I'm wrong here, but was related to the DeepSeek moment that was going on a few, like, what's it been, 2-3 months now? Since that? Where I think prior to that, I hadn't seen other LLMs displaying their chain of reasoning. And so DeepSeek introduced that, and then now others, we've seen others copy that feature basically. What can we talk about the DeepSeek moment? Because when this was happening online, everyone was going bananas, you know, that somehow DeepSeek had reverse engineered these billions of dollars that had been poured into tools like ChatGPT, and they had done it for 1/1000th of the cost and created a, you know, feature competent model, something like that. What was the big deal about DeepSeek? And then is it that big of a deal actually?
So I had wrote about this too, which was, I think, one really great post, got a couple million plus impressions. So essentially, it was interesting because I have been following DeepSeek for a while since and last year, right? There was always a very competent team, and they have an interesting backstory, which I'm happy to get into. But DeepSeek V3 was already really good. It was already the first like frontier-esque. It maybe not frontier, but like just near the frontier open source model. It was quite good at coding. It was fully open, and they shared their sort of paper around it, the weights and training. And it was just really good. So, but then people, I mean, I think within the AI space, people knew about it, but outside of that, people weren't like freaking out that they launched a pretty good, close to frontier open source model, right? And then DeepSeek R1 drops, and people started freaking out. But it was still pretty delayed. Like I think it was released, and then only till like a week after the markets crash. Or not crash, but like NVIDIA took like 10% whatever off the market cap. So it was kind of strange how there was a sort of delay in that. But essentially, I think they basically launched the first like open source, close to frontier reasoning model. And yes, people argue it's trained for whatever, I think it was like $6 or $10 million, right? It's somewhat true in the sense of, yes, maybe the training run costed 10 million, but it doesn't take into account the failed experiments, the R&D costs, right? The sort of cost of learning how to do this and the people costs. So, right, can someone, if you give them a formula, train a model for $10 million? Maybe, probably. But doesn't mean the path of getting there was probably much more expensive. Gotcha. However, it doesn't mean it's not impressive that they were able to do it, right, with a fraction of the resources. And also they were able to innovate with a lot of unique methods and like sort of making it more efficient, making it easy, faster, cheaper, etc. So overall, like I think it was basically telling the world that these models, competition is going to be pretty fierce. It's not always going to require hundreds of millions of dollars to train as we thought. And that the competition is just a little bit behind, right? So it's going to force OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google and whoever to continue to push the bar. And you can't really just launch and rest because the competition is very fierce.
Yeah. Is there an advantage here, or at least the indication that there will be an ongoing advantage for the new entrants that can just reverse engineer the work of the incumbents?
I don't know if it's really reverse engineering. There's some argument of like distillation, like you can take a smart model and then distill it to train a not so smart model and make it smarter. And so distillation, I think, was pretty powerful. And DeepSeek was able to distill other model. Well, some people argue that distill from OpenAI TBD, but either way, the power distillation is very powerful because you can distill a smart model you can make a dumber model smarter through distillation, right?
And so what does distillation mean?
Just taking the input output and the reasoning of a smart model and letting the dumber model train on the smarter model.
I guess that's what I meant by reverse engineering. You're using a different term here, distillation, but
reverse engineering
is distillation an ongoing threat now for the incumbents?
A little bit, and I would say it was different from reverse engineering in that reverse engineering typically means like you look under the hood, right, and you see what the blueprint is, and then you reverse engineer.
They're looking at the outputs.
Right. This is more of like the input-output pairing and the chain of thought, and then training on that. So it's not directly reverse engineering. It's more just like you have a master teacher.
It's like indirect reverse engineering.
Yeah, or just learning from a teacher. Right? And if the teacher is sharing all the knowledge publicly, you can argue that, well, you just ask the teacher like 100 times. Right. You can learn.
It's like an imitation, form of imitation.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So there's that. So I would say, is it a threat? Well, in the sense of like, I think it makes the moat like maybe less strong because you can always have someone who's like pretty close to you, or maybe not surpass you, but maybe get pretty close just through distillation. But also you can argue maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it's like back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s when you had Intel and AMD, right? Like Intel there was always some gap, but it wasn't like super big. But Intel was able to stay ahead because back then, because they just kept out in it or kept pushing the frontier, right? And there was always this willingness to pay for the latest, greatest Intel chip from the enthusiasts and maybe the high compute people. And for the mass market, sure, you could use Intel, you could use AMD, but if you wanted the best, you would pay a premium for the Intel chip, right? So some people argue that maybe it's like that with LLMs, is if you want the absolute best, you pay a premium for OpenAI, DeepMind, Anthropic, whoever, but that premium chip becomes not premium like in 6 months. Just like the Intel chip, like the, whatever next i7 series becomes not so premium after 6 months. So there's an argument of that, but the competition is fierce, especially when it's open source and free, right? You can run DeepSeek on your local computer. And so if you can do that through all these tools and sort of local llamas and Olamas and things like that, right? What does that mean for the pricing power of some of these frontier models? So it is a very interesting moment, and I think people were rightful to be shocked. But also, I think if you've been following the space, you always knew they were a good team and they had good foundational research. And it's actually a really interesting backstory was that most people know that they came from High Flyer, this high frequency trading company in China. But I think most people don't know is that part of it was, yes, curiosity for AI. But part of it was also because there was a big crackdown on the financial trading industry in China, right? So this is kind of the irony that during around that time, I think 2001, 2002-ish, the Chinese stock market wasn't doing that well. And the government was sort of like in the effort of trying to stabilize and crack down on the industry. They actually introduced a lot of things to basically kind of ban high frequency trading. So High Flyer was I think started in 2016-ish. There were all these like very quant heavy mathematical people. They had bought all these GPUs to do heavy trading, right? They're making a lot of money, and then they kind of grew too fast, too big, and started losing money, especially with the government changes to affect high frequency trading. So because of that, I don't call it a ban on high frequency trading, but certainly there were things that were very like adverse to these traders, right? Like for example, you had to register your strategy for new strategies, or you there was something like a firm got banned and they weren't allowed to close any positions for 3 days, right? Or something like that, which is very deadly if you're high frequency trading. So all these things affected them. And so I think it was kind of a little bit like, we have all these GPUs, we have all these smart people, we can't really trade in the same way we could. What do we do, right? Let's go do some AI.
Interesting.
And I think that's the part story, which is why how this firm was able to just suddenly get into AI and do it for free and give all these resources. I think there's an interesting story around the circumstance around that. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. And there's always these unintended consequences, right, of government intervention. So at least that was a positive one in this case.
That's why it's kind of ironic. It's like, well, if you interfere with the markets, right, you have a lot of capital flight. Like when they, ban you, like just overnight, you ban the ed tech industry, right? And or banning gaming industry. So all these like investors now, like it's hard to do a startup in China anymore because it's like volatile. Like you could just get your industry banned overnight. So it's very volatile, a lot of capital flight. But at the same time, it's like, imagine, this is just a thought experiment, right? Imagine what happens if you said, hey, all the smartest people from Wall Street, like Jane Street, Renaissance, like Two Sigma, D. Shaw, like instead of doing high frequency trading, go do AI, right? How much further ahead could we be in AI? Right. And again, I'm not saying we should do that, but I'm just saying if you had the thought experiments, like where is that like kind of, pros and cons?
Yeah, that's interesting. And there was a similar case when China banned Bitcoin mining.
Oh, interesting.
And like you were saying capital flight. I mean, this was more like, well, it's actual capital, right? Like these are Bitcoin miners, they get boxed up and shipped elsewhere and plugged back in. So you saw this dip in the Bitcoin hash rate, but then it immediately rebounded. Oh, literally just the transit time to get whatever the miners that couldn't be operated inside of China's borders anymore. They just needed to get shipped somewhere else and plugged back in. But it was like, boom, the capital flew and then it came back. So
interesting.
That's really interesting. And then, so what, do you think AI is something like the internet? Like it's going to touch every business. Basically, you basically, every business becomes an internet business. So every business ultimately becomes an AI business as well. Not in the sense that they're in the AI business, but they have to make use of AI to be in business.
Right. Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Right. It's a massive shift. And I think just like how everyone's, is going to have a website, I think in some point in time, every business or person probably may or will or need to have some sort of AI agent wrapper representation, right? Whatever that may be, whether it's an agent, whether it's like a tool, MCP, whether it's like some form of like AISC or something. But I think it's inevitable because as a consumer, right, you experience it's like a 10x better way of interactivity or search or whatever it is. I think businesses are going to adapt. And it's also from a just company pure capital efficiency perspective, it's just way more efficient. You can build companies now with so much more efficiently with way fewer people. And so I have this leaderboard tracker thing that I've been tracking all these super lean AI companies. It's called the Lean AI Leaderboard. So it tracks these companies who've gone from 0 to 5, 10, 30, 50 million ARR within, 2 years, and maybe 10, 15 people, right? It's crazy. Like, you've probably seen this, like Cursor, Mercor, Lovable, Bolt, all these companies, super lean teams, getting from 0 to 10, 20, 50 million ARR. And you've never seen, and many of them profitably, right? So you've never seen this before AI, because you have to raise all this money, hire a big team, get the product to market, ship all this code, and you're charging people like $10 a seat. So it's hard, it take time to compound. Whereas now with AI, you don't need to hire a lot of people, you get to market quickly, you can charge for much higher CVs or outcomes, and there's so much demand for it, it just pulls in the market. So it's been crazy to see, and I think this transformation of how companies are or will be built.
Would you rather have 1 Bitcoin today or 2 Bitcoin a few years from now? Bitcoin mining is a tried and true strategy for accumulating Bitcoin. Over a 2 to 4 year time frame, successful miners have consistently accumulated more Bitcoin than they otherwise would with a traditional dollar cost average strategy. Blockware mining as a service enables you to start mining Bitcoin from your laptop. Blockware handles everything from securing the miners to sourcing low-cost power to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. Plus, with Blockware's one-of-a-kind mining marketplace, you can buy and sell live Bitcoin miners with just a few keystrokes. In this marketplace, buyers get to purchase live machines at vetted facilities, enabling them to mine with zero lead time. And sellers get the opportunity to liquidate their machines and hosting contracts at will. This means you can mine Bitcoin with zero long-term commitment and high liquidity on your mining rigs. Blockware will even cover your energy bill for 1 week per mining rig when you sign up at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Again, that's 1 free week of Bitcoin mining at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. And on top of this offer, you can also use code BREEDLOVE to get $100 off your first mining rig with Blockware Solutions. Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. Obviously, you have a background as a technology founder. You've been on that space shuttle ride once.
Right.
How should people now that either are tech founders or are aspiring tech founders think about how AI has changed the game? I mean, you just said it makes them a lot leaner, but like, what are the main aspects that the tech founder should be thinking about in starting a technology business today in this landscape with AI? Like, what are the things they should be doing now that they shouldn't have been doing or thinking about maybe 10 years ago?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because now is probably one of the best times to build, but it's also one of the noisiest and craziest time to build because as the cost of building software becomes cheaper and cheaper, and as it goes to zero, right, you're gonna have so much noise. And what is it that you build? I think you have to be a lot more thoughtful about. So as an example, right, Y Combinator, the sort of really famous incubator for startups, right, tech startups. Now I think there's a stat which is I think over a quarter of the startups where the majority of the code is written by AI.
Wow.
Right. So this is last cohort. So this quarter, I'm sure it's going to be even more, maybe half. Right. So what does that mean when you have AI writing majority of the code, and barrier gets lower and lower? And so it's a really interesting open question, because now when you look at these companies, right? So you look at startups, for every idea, there's probably at least 10 competitors you know of, and then probably another like 20 you never even heard about, you didn't even know existed. Right. So what does that mean for differentiation, for go-to-market, for scaling? So I think all these questions become more important for the founders. Whereas before, maybe you could, build something and you had some competitors, but not 20, and you had some form of differentiation. Whereas now everyone is some sort of AI agent wrapper thing, right? Differentiation is hard to get by. It's hard to know exactly where you differentiate. It's also, and by the way, you also have the risk of the incumbents, aka the foundational model companies, right? Because if you're in their path, you might just get crushed with their next release.
Yeah.
So there's a founder, for example, who had this brand asset generation app, which was pretty cool actually by the time, because the foundational models, they weren't really good at generating good images, right? So basically they could take like your company brand asset experience logo, do a little bit of training, and then generate brand creators in your style very quickly, right? So I try to, maybe like half a year ago, we have a company mascot called Spotty. It's like a really cute, like pink character, and we have a certain illustration style, and our designers are always really busy, right? So some of our product or business teams, they want to say, hey, can we generate a version of Spotty on the Eiffel Tower, right? And the design team wouldn't really have time because they were busy. This company will let you do that. So in real time, very quickly, you can like instantly generate like infinite permutations of Spotty doing all these different types of activities, right? It can be canoeing, rolling on the Eiffel Tower, whatever. It was amazing. And that was like, I was blown away. And then until ChatGPT 4 image gen came out, right? Which is the new image generation model where the Ghibli like anime style you probably saw, right? Now it can generate in many different styles. So I was okay, maybe before I try to start up, let me just give ChatGPT like 2 images of Spotty and our style. And now with this context, let me prompt it to generate like a Spotty on the Eiffel Tower, right? And it just did it like in our style with the right character, with the right sort of like style design, and it wasn't missing any arms or anything. So it was crazy. I was like, oh wow, this ChatGPT now can just do what this company did. And unfortunately, that's tough, right? Because even if it was a little bit better, like if I can do all this in ChatGPT for $20 a month, right? Even if they could still be a bit better, that's a lot of pricing pressure, right? Because they couldn't charge 2,000 anymore. Maybe they can still charge 200, but right, as ChatGPT keeps getting better, so it's tough. So I think it's a little bit like, are you basically on the path of the models, and are you doing all this like custom work to fill a gap that the model currently has, because that gap is probably going to go away as the models get better, or are you building something that's adjacent and your service gets better when the models get better, right? I think there's a big distinction, because if you're on the path of the LLM, like you'll say, oh, LLMs today, they can't do X, right? Well, the foundational models are probably working on that if it's a big enough a problem, right? And it's only a matter of time before they can do X. Or you would say, hey, I'm building something that's only going to get better as the models get better. So even if ChatGPT 4 image gen comes out, right, I can just plug it in and my product gets better. That's more like safer than if you're trying to like cover some gap or hole. So it's all the things to think about. So it's only your differentiation against competitors, and also your sort of viability against foundational models. And there may be a world where, and this is a little bit scary for to think or say as a technologist, but there may be a world where building a tech company ends up being kind of like building a CPG brand or drop shipping, even, right? Whereas I think a lot of technologists like, and maybe we feel like, oh, we're special, we're a little bit better or whatever, but at the end of the day, maybe we're just drop shippers of AI generative software. It's like you drop ship something from China and then you arbitrage the sort of social media, whatever, CAC to LTV to CAC, and you kind of get customers. Maybe building a tech company is like that. You take the AI generated code from Anthropic, OpenAI, you arbitrage some like go to market, and you repackage it, and which is a pretty scary thought.
So democratization of software engineering and building tech companies.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. Well, it seems like software is, what are we doing? Taking the human imagination and making it real, basically real, interactive, let's say.
Right.
And so there's a lot of human imagination out there, but it seems like historically there's been this bottleneck of engineering talent, right? And that's why engineers pre-AI, I don't know what they're getting paid now, but like average salaries are, $500,000 to the $1 million range, probably guys at Google and stuff like that. That's pretty substantial, right? For someone, for that type of talent.
Right.
You mentioned one of the companies, and I have I had used their product a little bit, Lovable, where you're actually using LLM prompt style interface, but you're telling it to build software for you. So you, again, kind of bridging that gap between human imagination and software product. Could you, and you also mentioned they're one of these, I think you said lean AI.
Yeah, exactly.
Could we just talk about that? Like, you don't have to focus on Lovable per se, but like this type of business model where where we're unleashing people's imagination to just, for non-technical people to be able to engineer software products all over the world. Like what do you think about that? How's that going to impact the world?
It's incredible. I think probably one of the OG companies doing this is Replit, right? If you heard of them, they're just like this YC company. Maybe it was like started 2018 or something. I don't want to misquote that, but it's this company that's been using like making coding accessible to everybody, right? And this is pre-LLM, but LLM obviously took it to a whole different level. So now you have all these companies, Lovable, Bolt, Vercel, V0, Replit, and these are just like the cloud hosted ones, right? There's also ones like locally on your computer, like Cursor, Windsurf, GitHub Copilot, that live within your IDE or Visual Studio and lets you code way faster and build stuff. And so it's incredible to see all this development, because I think the stat is only 0.3% of the world know how to code. Right? And there's way more people with imagination and drive and ambition to build stuff. And they were always historically bottled by engineering. So I think if you focus on just the cloud, like hosted browser versions, like a Lovable or Bolt or a Replit, right? They take away the whole like complexity of coding, because it's not just the coding, it's actually also the deployment, the sort of like hosting, getting it live, and then also publishing it. So they do all of that for you in a sort of easy, simple
and troubleshooting, right? It was like troubleshooting my code as I was writing it.
Yes, in some cases as well.
Whatever. Instructing it to write it.
Exactly, debugging it as well. So they take care of all of that in a simple, easy way. And I think a lot of this caught investors by surprise, because this is a company that, you know, it feels like, how big is this TAM, right? Of like coding online, these like prototype apps, and today it's like good, it's amazing, but it's not quite there yet. I don't think you can go and just build a tech company today, right? So it's a little bit like, who's the audience? And I think maybe people didn't really quite capture that as like, the audience is actually kind of a consumer audience, right? It's like if you built Spotify or something like that, it's like so many people want to create things.
Yes.
And so it's a consumer audience that's willing to pay money, even if it's not quite good enough yet today, right? But there's also a question of like how much of that is sticky or recurring, right? Like if you get stuck eventually, or if you have to migrate off to like a more traditional coding environment, or if you eventually still have to hire some engineers, right? How sticky is that revenue? Are you going to stay with Vercel V0, or are you going to move off to a more traditional platform? So I think there's still a lot of questions there, but it's undeniable the traction they're getting. I think there's a tweet from the founder maybe a month or two back. There's 30,000 new lovable apps created a day, right? 30,000.
Wow.
Right. And the question is like, can you even imagine 30,000 different ideas of what you wanted to create?
Yeah.
Right? Certainly I can't, but the world of billions of people.
And these are functional apps? Like
I don't know if they're functional. I think there are things that are being created, started, right? So whether it's like finished or shipped or making money TBD.
But that's a massive
But it's
number.
like a lot of people who want to create stuff, right? Or try things. So it's really interesting. And then these companies are also super lean, going from 0 to 30 million ARR, I think in maybe like 3 to 6 months. Right now, I think some of them are at 50, right? I think maybe Bolt or Lovable. So it's incredible to see that growth. Now there's a question of like, how much is this going to stay? How much are we going to retain? How much of it is going to come and go?
Sure.
And I think Jasper was a good example of that, right? They were super early in the AI copywriting space, went from 0 to 100 million in record time. And I think they shrunk a bit with ChatGPT. Maybe they come back up with TBD, but they were supposed to be the next biggest breakout company. And now that ChatGPT 4 came out, they're kind of, they're still gonna be around, but maybe they weren't gonna be the decacorn that people thought they were.
Yeah, so that seems to be a pretty serious theme here, right? That if there's gonna be a lot of feature imitation. So if you're developing something that ChatGPT has I'm picking one of the foundational LLMs here, but if they have the capacity to do the thing, they already have the distribution. Right. And so if you start to have market success, it's very likely they're going to catch on to that and just deploy it themselves. And then you could get crushed basically. Is that, well, and kind of in older models, I'm thinking of like when Instagram becomes popular, Facebook buys it.
Right.
But maybe the acquisition strategy is less viable here because it's faster to deploy these things. Is that what it is?
So I think it's an open question about the acquisition path, like Instagram and Facebook. Yeah. Because if the market is big enough, like coding, right, you're gonna expect the foundation models to start getting there, and you're already seeing that with Claude and Claude Code from Anthropic, and then also OpenAI Codex, which releases like a similar thing. Yeah. All right. So. And Anthropic and Claude Code is amazing. It's like this terminal tool. It's like this agentic system that reasons with your code, understands your code base, has tool use, and it's like really powerful. So you're seeing kind of pressure from both sides. So if you're like a company doing the code space, right, you have competitors from other companies and startups and incumbents. Right, GitHub has GitHub Copilot, and then also startups. So there's a startup I met. They basically built a lovable for mobile apps in like a month and a half, right? So it was crazy. They went to YC, they pivoted, they built this like lovable mobile apps in a month and a half, and it was like same interface. You could type in and it generates mobile apps. Wow, it was like crazy. So you're like, wait a minute, like if you can build something like a lovable from a startup with 2 people in like a month and a half, right? How much competition are you gonna get? And at the same time, like you have the foundation models also coming to your space with the Claude Code and things like that. So it is going to be competition from all sides. Wow. But the good news is there seems to be some appetite for acquisitions. Like OpenAI just bought Windsurf, right, which is like a competitor to Cursor for $3 billion. Right, there were Cursor. If you say the market leader for coding Copilot assistant is GitHub Copilot, the incumbent with maybe 60-70% share, then you have Cursor, which I think is at 300 million ARR. Right, then you have Windsurf, which is I think maybe around 50-ish, maybe 100, 50, 100, depending on the time. So OpenAI bought the sort of second place in startup, right, for $3 billion. So that's pretty good, I think, for a founder and outcome. So there's some sign that they're willing to buy instead of just crush you, because maybe it's easier for them to buy than to spend all this time to build. Maybe they want the data. So there's some sign, but at the same time, Claude Code is really, really good, right? And I actually personally went from a journey of like Copilot to Cursor to Windsurf to Client Agent now to Claude Code, because it's just really good. It's free. I mean, it's free. The tool is free. You have to pay Anthropic, but the tool is free, and it just solves problems really effectively. So if you see and it's really easy for people to switch between these tools, right? So the answer to your question is, it's too early to tell. There seems to be some appetite for M&A, but for every Windsurf that got acquired for $3 billion, there's probably 100 startups and people building these coding assistants. Many of them raise a lot of money, and I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah.
Well, I guess that's a great point. At least seems like it's going to be hyper competitive, which presumably is good for the consumer, right? Yes. And increasing quality and decreasing pricing over time. Yes. Yeah, it's really interesting, man. It's moving so fast. Like it's actually breakneck speed. Yeah. Like every week you feel like there's another moment, it's like boom, boom, boom. Bitcoin custody is evolving. Both self-custody and single third-party custody come with significant risk and trade-offs. Onramp is pioneering a new standard, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure, adding fault tolerance and redundancy to your setup. Onramp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated cold storage multi-sig vault, guarded by 3 independent institutional-grade custodians, none of which that have unilateral control over your assets. More than just security, Onramp simplifies inheritance and estate planning, ensuring your Bitcoin wealth moves seamlessly to your loved ones without the risk and complexities of self-custody. Easily designate beneficiaries right in the Onramp dashboard, eliminating the need for unreliable treasure maps or other complex key-sharing schemes. You can also avoid the probate process and ensure your heirs receive their Bitcoin securely with legal title transfers designed to keep your wealth intact for generations. As Bitcoin continues to appreciate, Onramp helps you seamlessly access financial services, from inheritance and insurance to trading, loans, IRAs, and more, all without compromising on security. And importantly, the onboarding process is fast and frictionless. I set up my own Onramp account, and it was far easier than dealing with hardware wallets or traditional self-custody setups. The team walked me through everything step by step, making sure I had a secure, reliant setup for my Bitcoin wealth. Secure your generational wealth with confidence. Schedule a consultation with the Onramp team today at onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Again, that's onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. In the last kind of few minutes we have here, ask you kind of a selfish question. I told you offline, I have a 100-page draft of a book written, and then I have about 1,000 pages of unstructured notes.
Right.
And my producer, Mike, and I, he's really talented with LLMs. We've been trying to wrestle with like how best to leverage the LLM to try and synthesize all of these notes into a structure that makes sense. And like in the draft, I had a certain structure of the book in mind, but then when I did some initial stuff with the LLM, it started recommending other structures that were actually better, I thought. So it's like already like, okay, it's already pushing that. And then I don't know, when it does the actual writing, it doesn't quite feel human. So it's like it's like a good starting point, but it doesn't quite write the way I want it to write. So like that's not there still. But like I just wanted to ask broadly, like how we should be approaching this tool set with the aim of writing, a really comprehensive book. In this case, it's about really like the nature of language, and then we get into nature and history of money. And then it's kind of a philosophical book on how language works and how money works and why it's also important. Also about economics and human action. But just if you have any thoughts about that, like what things to think about in trying to accomplish that.
Yeah, I think there's probably a request for startup here, right? There's probably some startup somewhere doing this exactly what you described. So one is just finding out what tools to use is kind of a problem. There's so many tools, who's good, who's real, who's not, right? And I bet you there's people doing this that we don't know about it, or it just hasn't broken out from the noise. And two is also, even if there were tools doing this, maybe it's better, easier to just use the base LLM and just work with ChatGPT, right? So it's kind of a question of like, is it better to use a tool, or you just use a foundational model? So I would imagine, because you have so much content and history, you could just like ingest it all and then train or fine tune the model based on your voice, your style, your experiences, and then have it right in your style. And I think there's already like ways to do this. There's like OpenAI has a fine tuning API to do this. I think they also have some projects or tone of voice that you can tweak based on your tone. I haven't used that, but also short is I think you can work with like these models based on your historical context that should generate something that's pretty good. Now, I have also noticed that even for me, for my writing, the AI, it's pretty good, but if you wanted to make it like really stand out, the last like 5-10%, you still need a bit of like human touch and
you gotta polish it.
Right. And the other part too, which I noticed, is the AIs are good, but it's not a replacement for a human employee or partner, because you can't delegate to the AI. Like for me, when I do my content, so I actually hired a writer to help me with some of the content as well, because when I was using AI, I felt like I had to be the one driving it, right? Like if I didn't sit down and prompt it, it wouldn't go anywhere. If I was sick one day and nothing would get done. But with humans, like because I'm paying someone, it's their like responsibility, accountability to get it done, right? So so my writer would actually help me. She would follow up with me and say, hey, did you do this? And like, let's get on a cadence. And just, I think that all the parts around the human, the accountability, the delegation, that's still very helpful. It takes the mental load off of me into someone I can trust and rely on. And I think the same thing for AI. It's like, even if AI could just like spit out a book for you, right? There's all these things that you have to do, like that a human or partner could help you. And look, maybe the AI can get there with long-term like agentic systems, but for now, it's still more of a co-pilot than an actual real thought partner. So that's the part where I feel like if I really wanted to, and if you really want to, and fine tune and give it all this data, you could probably do something that's like 90% of the way there. But that last mile and the final, like getting the book published, right? Like showing up, like that part, I think you still need a partner to.
Of course. Do you iterate on this stuff? Because like one of the things, like the big challenge was like 1,000 pages of unstructured notes, right? Like that's for a human to go through that is like, I don't want to think how long it would take. So I was trying to like really leverage the LLM to help structure that, like get it into some outline format that would then be translatable to a table of contents in a book, something like that. Do you think about iterating on these things? So like you have it output a form, you know, of an outline, and then you use that outline again as an input to try to, is there a refinement process that you consider?
You probably can, but I think you should also try different models, because different models have different like context length and different strength. I think Gemini has probably one of the largest context length.
Okay, it does.
Or something. 2.5 Pro, I think. So if you go to AI Studio, you can use it and play with it. So I would try probably different models or combination of models for this. 1,000 pages is a lot, so you might have to break it down. But if you can like start with just dumping it all in and starting to like reason and synthesize from that with different models, I think that's probably a good way to start. And then maybe you can drill down on certain areas that you care about more. Like I'm sure within 1,000, maybe probably only like 100 really matter, right? I'm assuming. So then
I don't know, to be honest.
Try to pull that out, try to extract that, and then you can also give it like different path, like maybe front to back to front, and try to just like get more of the context out so you can refine it.
Okay. What you said, back to front to back. What does that mean?
Oh, just like if it doesn't fit in the context, right? Like you can try like prioritizing it in different ways. Like is the most recent things first, or is it the least or the oldest things first? Is it certain topics? So just like different ways to prioritize and sort. And then different ways to like selectively filter out things that matter. Maybe you could say, I want to focus on Bitcoin, right? So
these themes,
or maybe you do some sort of reg eval to extract out the themes around crypto first, and then try to do that.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. What I did was basically, because they were all in the Notes app, so I exported those as PDFs. Right. Then there was like 17 different Notes files. And then in combination, they were too big. You know, they were, I don't know, 2 gigabytes or something, because some of them had images in the notes. Right. And so then I compressed all of the PDFs individually, and then I combined all the compressed PDFs. Right. And it got under 100 megabytes, which was something that ChatGPT could take. Right. And so that was like the way I went about it. But and then I gave it some direction. I'm like, I'm trying to write this type of book. We had another guest on the show that gave us this framework, which he called the CRIT framework. Okay. So you like label in the prompt, context, I'm writing a book. It's about this. Here's what I'm trying to do. Role, you are a world-class book editor. You're helping me prepare this outline, giving a role to the LLM. And then interview is like, you can ask me 5 clarifying questions for further context. And then task, generate the numbered outline, basically. And so I did that. And it outputs something pretty useful, but I just was trying to figure out how to refine that process. And so you said Gemini has the largest context window.
I think has one of the largest. Okay. Yeah, let's try it at Gemini 2.5 Pro. And then also I think I would imagine for this type of work you may have to like do some scripting to like iterate over it, right? Like take the first top 10, then like next 10 or the next 100, and then just like iterate over it. Okay. And then do like a collective or like a consensus based, like you. So I don't know if you can do it in one single like ChatGPT window. You might need to like write some scripts or sort of workflows.
Okay. So you're saying maybe generate different outputs and then
right, and
then do
like,
the iteration of synthesizing those inputs
exactly,
or outputs
right,
rather.
right. So you have a multi-layer, multi-structured approach.
Okay,
right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I will definitely try that. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably get it. You get that Bitcoin upends everything that state-sponsored schools teach us about money. For those who get the importance of Bitcoin, it is important that we have a smart way to buy and hold Bitcoin. My friends at Coinbits, the oldest Bitcoin-only exchange in the United States, have pioneered the concept of roundups, which converts your spare change into Bitcoin. Simply connect your credit or debit cards, and your usual purchases are rounded up to the nearest dollar, letting you stack sats on every purchase without even thinking about it. Coinbits also provides a terrific self-custody experience. Connect a hardware wallet for automatic withdrawals into cold storage to minimize your risk and stay sovereign over your Bitcoin. My favorite Coinbits feature is Coinbits Plus, which gives you the best exchange rate on Bitcoin. It even gives you real-time feedback on how well you are doing on your savings plan. With Coinbits Plus, power users can save more money to buy even more Bitcoin. All that, plus peer-to-peer cash and Bitcoin payments, target orders, price alerts, and more means Coinbits can help you do almost anything you need to do with Bitcoin. So go to coinbits.app/breedlove to sign up today. Again, that is Coinbits, BITS.app/breedlove. The farm at Okefenokee is a revolutionary new regenerative agricultural community. It features an 8,000 tree olive orchard, which they use to make their own olive oil, as well as a very large pecan orchard. All the animals on the farm are heritage animals, with some varieties over 100 years old and others thousands of years old. Fresh eggs are produced daily by the farm's chickens. Also, there are over 1,000 beehives that pollinate the over 200 heirloom fruits and vegetables and provide honey to all the residents. The farm makes its own molasses, unrefined sugar, herbs, and spices. The farm also features an herbal apothecary and a commercial kitchen. These are just a few reasons why the farm is the healthiest place on earth. To learn more about the healthiest place on earth, go to okefarm.com and use discount code BREEDLOVE for $21,000 off custom cabin pricing. Again, to learn more about the farm at Okefenokee, go to okefarm.com and be sure to tell them I sent you. I guess here, like this in the last few minutes here, like, right, could you just speculate about the future of AI? Like, what are the big companies you expect to see come on the scene? Do you expect, I mean, obviously we talked a lot about there being an explosion of these companies with AI now engineering software itself. So like, do you expect to see, I don't know, I guess like what products, what types of business models, like what things do you expect to see in the future? How do you expect to see AI changing our lives basically in the next 10 years?
Oh, that's a pretty immediate question to end on. But I think the best resource I think is probably this blog. I think it's called AI 2027. I don't know if you've seen it.
No.
It's an incredible sort of well-written and thought out prediction of the future. I think it's by this ex-OpenAI researcher, and he wrote about I think he's been pretty spot on in his past like essays about predicting 2024, 2025, and his prediction for 2027. Right, which is how the AIs are going to evolve and progress, and how it's going to affect like governments and like cybersecurity, infrastructure in our lives. So it's definitely, it's a fascinating read, and it's pretty intense. So definitely recommend checking it out. I think it's AI-2027.com.
Okay.
For that, but I'd say like I'm really excited and nervous to see what happens when coding gets solved, right? Like software engineering. And I'm not saying like it gets solved 100% of the time where you don't need any engineers. I think it's going to be a spot where it's like kind of extreme, unfortunately, which is you either have really senior engineers or you have AI, right? There's no junior, intermediate, or even like intermediate plus. Wow. I think we're already at that level. Like if you use like Claude Code today, it's probably at the level of like a intermediate-ish engineer, right? So, and certainly it's It can do things that no human could do because you can write front-end code, back-end code, iOS code, C++ code, like all these things, any language, any context, and it has the ability to reason through problems and debug and solve them and get the context of the code base. So you already have that. So this is what, like Q1 2025, right? So can you imagine what we get by Q4 end of this year? Right? Intermediate plus engineers. So what happens when you have software essentially kind of being solved, right? What does that mean for business, society? Like what happens in a world of software abundance? I don't think people are ready for that. Like you could just have any software you wanted, right? What does that mean? What does it mean for a business model? Like is SaaS going to be around? Like why would I pay, DocuSign, whatever, $100 a month when I can just make one myself? Right? Sure, maybe there's a brand, so maybe things become more of a brand play or like a CPG world. But yeah, I don't really know that the world is ready for software abundance. So I'm really excited to see how that plays out. And frankly, that also affects me as a entrepreneur builder, right? It's because what do I spend my time building, right? And I think you see a lot of people focusing more on distribution and brand awareness. I have a friend who's like a kind of a contract CTO, and he spends a lot of time building with AI native. And he's like, yeah, the most existential thing for me is not the code, it's building my own brand. Because that's the thing that's going to maybe the only thing that's going to differentiate, right? So yeah, what does that mean? Software abundance, future of brand and company building, and also just even job markets, right? Like I remember when I studied computer science, it wasn't that cool. So it was easier to get in. And then when you graduated, you can make 100K plus, right? Then it became really hot because everyone knew, so if I wanted to make 100K plus, I would become a computer science major. So it became really competitive to get in. It's like ridiculous GPAs and requirements and 3% accepted, whatever. People will come in and you make 150, sometimes 200K. Right now, it's like if you graduate, it's hard to get a job because all the junior roles are being replaced by AI.
Wow.
So, what does that mean for the future of labor and job and what people study? Right. And if AI can do all these things, and you're already seeing this in companies, right? I talked to a lot of founders who are just like, I want to hire like 5-10 super cracked senior engineers and AI, and that's it, right? I don't want to hire hundreds of people. I don't want to deal with handholding. I just want like the best in AI, and we're just going to move way faster. There's less people management, there's less bottlenecks, less like context switching. We're just going to ship. And you see, that's why you have the Lean AI leaderboard, right? All these companies doing 10, 20, 50 million ARR with such small teams. So I think we're seeing that. So what does that mean for the future of society and work? It's pretty interesting and scary.
Yeah, I'd say so. What is the leverage multiple, do you think, today?
For our software?
Yeah, if you have one crack software developer plus AI, like how many software developers does that equal pre-AI?
I think it depends. So if you're coming from like a company with like a super large legacy old code base, I've heard people say maybe it's like 20, 30%, right? Just because people are used to ways of working. Some people use that, some people don't. The AI is like, maybe there's like too much context or tribal knowledge. So I'd say some people like in big, larger companies with like really massive legacy code bases. But if you're starting new from scratch, like you're starting a brand new startup, brand new project, I'd say probably like 5x.
Wow.
Yeah, because you're starting from, there's no context, right? And you're just creating things. You can create way faster. It's code that the AI wrote. So like it has the built-in context and it's in the sort of style and mannerism of the best practice. So with that, like, you can ship things like 5, maybe 10 like times faster because, and now it's like, you don't even need a backlog sometimes because it's like, it takes me longer to create a ticket to add to Jira or Linear about this backlog feature than for me to just tell the AI to build it, right? Which is crazy. Right. Yeah.
That's a fascinating quantitative proxy for the productivity boom. Basically, is that what 5 to 10 engineers could have done pre-AI that are probably making, whatever, $500,000 to $1 million a year each. Now you can take one guy plus a few $1,000s a month or year AI tool to do all that work. So that, that's staggering, right? It's
I mean, maybe you're not replacing 500,000 engineers. I think you're probably more like replacing maybe 3-ish, like 120K engineers. Like,
okay. So more of the intermediate.
Yeah. I don't think AI is replacing like the super senior, like system architect, like, you know, super 10x engineers. Yeah. But if you needed someone to build you the front end, do the login service, and then do backend database, right? Like, and some combination of like some API endpoints and like a mobile app.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
but 5 guys at 120K a year, 600K a year, you can now do that for like a couple grand a year, maybe.
Plus one, like,
one
really
guy
senior
plus
person
the couple
driving
grand for the AI tool.
Yeah.
That's a huge, you know, what, a 99% cost decrease.
Yeah,
or something.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? But it also means more noise, more competition.
Sure. Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Henry, thank you so much, man. I really like learning about this AI stuff. So I really appreciate you coming out and doing this.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's fun and happy to share and check out some of the resources. I write a lot online, so you can check out.
So let me hit the top 3 again. The AI Bootcamp.
AI Crash Course.
Sorry. And then you mentioned AI 2027 as a blog.
Yeah, that's a blog I wrote about the future prediction. You can follow my Substack or LinkedIn, Twitter. I share a lot of my content there.
Please
about
mention
different
all those
tools. Yeah, different like startup experiences, company building. henry9th.substack.com is Henry's best hits. And then also LinkedIn-in/Henry the Ninth, and then x.com/Henry the Ninth with an S at the end.
Awesome.
Well, I'm sure you'll see it in the description.
We'll link to all of it in the show notes. Henry, thank you, man.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.